Hey there, my name is Angela. Welcome to my channel. Today we are comparing the Nifty 50 to the EFM 22mm lens. Let's go! To start off, I'd like to talk about the focal length of these lenses, both of which are fixed, which means that they do not zoom in or zoom out. So the 50mm lens will always shoot at 50mm and the 22mm lens will always shoot at 22mm. The 22mm lens gives you much more of a wide view, while the 50mm lens will crop it in a bit more, and because it's more cropped in, it does give a more compressed illusion, so the things behind your subject appear closer to your subject than they do when you're shooting with the 22mm lens. Yesterday I went out and got some video for you guys of me standing 20 feet away from my camera mounted onto a tripod with both the 22mm lens and the 50mm lens, just to give you an idea of what these look like side by side. You can really tell the difference, and you can tell that if you want a shot that you can get a full body in and not be super far away, you definitely want to use the 22mm lens. But if you're wanting something a little bit more cropped in and close up, even if you are a little bit further away, you'll want the 50mm lens. Now I'm going to talk about aperture. So the aperture of these lenses are my favorite feature for both of them. The 22mm drops down to a 2.0 and the 50mm lens drops down to a 1.8. That makes the 50mm lens slightly better in low light situations, and one instance that comes to mind right away when I talk about low light situations with these lenses is 4th of July last year. I originally tried to shoot some video with the 22mm lens, but it just wasn't coming out how I wanted it to, so I switched over to the 50mm lens, and the video quality looked so much better and it was capturing so much more, even with that slight 1.8 difference. I think the fact that it has a longer focal length had a lot to do with it as well. Speaking of aperture, I really want to talk about the background blur. So the 22mm lens does a really good job at blurring your background. However, because the angle is wider, you need your subject to be closer in order to get that effect. Whereas the 50mm lens, because its focal length is longer, you can have a subject further away from you and still get a really good blurred background. An example I have of this are some photos that I took right before filming this video. So for these pictures, I just set up my camera in my room with my light ring and then rearranged my fairy lights over here so that way they would get blurred out in the background to create some nice bokeh. For my 50mm lens, the bokeh was very apparent even when I was about 4 or 5 feet away from my camera. However, for my 22mm lens, I had to get about 1 foot away, maybe 2 feet away from my camera to get that similar bokeh effect, but not quite the same. So the Canon M50 does do a better job at blurring the background, mostly because of that compression though that the focal length creates. Here are some photos that I took with that blurred background, and here are some photos that I took at the same distance with my 22mm lens, just to give you an idea of how much wider the shot is. After I took photos from similar distances, I also took some pictures where I moved my camera closer to the fairy lights and closer to me to kind of have a similar frame as the 50mm, just so you can see how those shots would look taken on the 22mm lens. Another thing I would like to talk about is using these lenses for landscape photography. So if you have ever seen my Instagram, then you know that I like taking landscape photos, and I use both of these lenses for landscape photos. They both give me very different looks, and when it comes to the sun setting, I whip out both of these because that low aperture does so good in low light. And here are some photos that I've gotten with the 22mm lens. And here are some photos I've gotten with the 50mm lens. remember when I first got my 50mm lens, I was so excited, and it was my go-to for landscape photos, so just keep that in mind. The Nifty 50 is really well known for being really good at portrait photos, but it is more versatile than that, and you can use it to get some pretty sick landscapes. To wrap up this video, I would like to list some pros and cons for both of these lenses. To start off, the Nifty 50, a pro that I have is its ability to really blur the background well. Another pro that I have is its price. It is a super cheap lens for what it does. A con that I would mention, however, it needs a mount adapter if you're shooting with a Canon M50, which I am. So that kind of bumps up the price by $100, but either way, I think it's worth it. As for the 22mm lens, I have 3 pros. One is its compact size. Look how tiny that thing is. It is so freaking compact, and when you pair it with the Canon M50, it is so discreet and just I love how tiny it is. That's my biggest pro for this lens. My second pro for it is its low light capabilities, and my third pro for this lens is its capabilities as a vlogging lens. So I use this lens to shoot all my YouTube videos. Right now I'm shooting this video with my kit lens only because I wanted to physically hold this lens in front of you while comparing the two lenses. But this thing, if I was filming any other video, I would be filming it with this. You can go back to my next video back or the one before that, and I'm shooting it with this lens because it is an awesome vlog lens. I also made a review about it, about using it as a vlog lens if you want to check that out. I also made a video for the Nifty 50 if you want to check that out as well. But yeah, sorry I rambled, but I just wanted to mention how good of a lens this is for vlogging. Now that I made all these comparisons for you, I would like to let you know who's the winner between these two lenses in my own personal opinion. So between these two, I like the 22mm lens more than the Nifty 50. And I have nothing against the Nifty 50. It is always there when I need it. And it gets gorgeous portraits, beautiful landscapes. However, the 22mm lens has become my default lens. It is always on my camera. I guess it's the compact size or just how strong it is for such a little lens, but I love it. And between the two, I would choose this one over this one. However, if you're struggling to choose between the two, I say purchase both of them. They're very different lenses and both have their own strong suits, and they're not super expensive. I mean, compared to other lenses, they don't really break the bank as much, so maybe if you're torn between the two, get one now and then get one later. Personally, I don't regret having both. And on that note, that is all I have for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here and you like what you see, hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Until next time, bye.